Hey guys, coming with a slightly different video style today. We're just gonna get right into what I'm sure is probably gonna be a demonetized video, but you know, it's important. You can't see an opera without understanding the singers that you're seeing, right? Now, just in general, there are over 30 different character types, or Fachs, in opera. Fach is a fancy German word for pocket. It's literally what pocket of characters your voice fits into. So this Fach describes a certain role that you find in opera. There are a lot of roles that have things in common, and so singers can decide that they will sing those particular kinds of roles. Hopefully the same Fach as the one that their voice is. And I know, you can just go onto Wikipedia and literally find a list of all the different Fach types, but I wanted to put together a video of examples for you guys because when it comes to music, I think it's a lot easier to hear something than it is to read it. All right, so let's pull up our fancy sheet here. So from top to bottom, we have sopranos, mezzos, and contraltos. So 3 different voice types in the female category. Sopranos obviously have the craziest extra amount of voices, so we'll start here with the coloratura. Coloraturas have a range from middle C to F6, and they're kind of like, I think of them like the tiny Olympic gymnasts who take home all those gold medals. They have a high voice, obviously, they're sopranos, but it's usually pretty small. It's not very rich or resonant. They're, you know, like those little girl acrobats. The thing that makes a coloratura soprano special is that they have to be super flexible, so they can sing really fast and really high. Coloratura roles would be like Frasquita in Carmen, or Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, or Olympia in The Tales of Hoffmann. And we're gonna look at a clip from Cunegonde's Glitter and Be Gay in Candide, sung by the absolutely bonkers talented Kristen Chenoweth. And next we have the dramatic coloratura. It's the same range, middle C to F6, and pretty much the same acrobatics. It's just more powerful, more dramatic. I like to think figure skaters rather than tiny gymnasts. They have the same high voice, same acrobatics, same level of flexibility, but this is where you get your Queens of the Night from the Magic Flute, or Gilda in Rigoletto, or Fior di Ligi in Così fan tutte. And for this one, we're going to check out Violetta's show-stopping aria, Sempre, libera, from La Traviata. Next up, we have the soubrette, or the light lyric soprano. Their range is similar, from a middle C, but then up to a high C. These are the ballerinas of opera. Their voices are known for being beautiful and sweet. They usually have the same agility and the same flexibility as coloraturas, but the parts are just not anywhere near as showy. They're not quite heavy or mature enough to be a lyric soprano. We'll talk about that in a second. So these parts are usually reserved for younger singers before they age into a bigger voice type. These would be roles like Despina from The Marriage of Figaro, Papagena in The Magic Flute, or Zerlina in Don Giovanni. Are you kind of seeing a Mozart theme here? And just excuse me for a sec while I completely melt into the floor listening to Barbara Bonney just slay Sophie's presentation of the Rose scene from Der Rosenkavalier. Next up, we have one step higher than the light lyric soprano, the full lyric soprano, or just lyric soprano for short. Her range is a little bit lower, from B3 to C6. I think of these less as ballerinas and more like ballroom dancers. These comparisons are gonna get me so much hate. But I think you'll know what I mean. It's more soulful, it's warmer, it's rounder, it's just more mature. It's also, like, opera singers will back me up here. It's the basic bitch of soprano voice types. It's super popular. It's not particularly known for speed or power or stamina. Like, not that it doesn't have those things, it does. It's just not a distinguishing trait. And there are countless roles, thank God, because the competition is fierce. You've got the Countess in The Marriage of Figaro, Liu in Turandot, Musetta in La Bohème. But I want to pull Lauretta's O mio babbino caro from Gianni Schicchi here because, guys, this should not be sung by kids. And that's a whole other subject I've talked about. It's controversial. I'll list it in the cards above. But yeah, listen, this is a grown-ass woman's aria, y'all. Just listen to it. A little bit bigger than the full lyric soprano, we have the Spinto soprano. And you'll probably start noticing a trend that the heavier the voice gets, the lower it gets. So the range for a Spinto soprano is A3 to high C. And now we're moving away from dancing and arts and more into just pure athleticism. Like, think long distance runner. These singers are very developed with big resonant sounds. They easily carry over a standard orchestra, and their voices are just a lovely medium dark roast. And for these singers, endurance is definitely the defining quality. They can sing really big for multiple hours every single day. Losing their voice is not something that happens to these singers. These are roles like Suor Angelica in Suor Angelica, or Mimi in La Bohème, or Marie in Wozzeck. And we're just going to take a second, luxuriate in Cho-Cho-san's Un bel dì from Madame Butterfly. Just absolutely slayed here by Leontyne Price. Along, our penultimate soprano is the dramatic soprano. Their range is the same as the Spinto before them, A3 to high C, and kind of like the soubrette or the light lyric graduating into a lyric soprano, Spintos usually graduate into dramatic sopranos. Not only do they do long distance running, they also start weightlifting. They're like the CrossFit icons of opera. These are big voices that carry over big orchestras. They have dark timbres and a super loud volume. Like, you're going to want to be wearing earplugs if you're sitting within 6 to 10 feet. The roles here are Tosca in Tosca, Leonore in Fidelio, Electra in Electra. And for this one, I pulled Turandot's aria in Questa Reggia from Puccini's Turandot. And last, we have the high dramatic soprano. Now, this is not high like notes high, it's just high like high art. Her range is from an F3 to a high C. And like the characteristics, I don't even know. It barely counts. This voice type is ridiculously rare. It's gigantic. It's like, we're talking like female sumo wrestler levels of gigantic. It's huge. It's huge and dark and huge and loud and huge. Literally, the voice type that this is for is Wagner. This is the type that everyone thinks of when they think of opera, you know, like the woman with the horns on her head and the breastplate and everything. And it's funny because it's just one of the rarest voice types that opera has. Of course, we have to play some Wagner here. So the most famous example is Brünnhilde's Hojotoho cry. You'll probably recognize it from the Walküre. And sopranos, you're done. Get out of here. Let's move on to the mezzos with a much more manageable 3 divisions of voice types. First, just like our sopranos, we have the coloratura mezzo-soprano. Now, mezzos in general will have a lower voice range. That's why they're mezzos and not sopranos. So for this particular type, their range is from G3 to B5. Still in the realm of athletics, but here we're thinking less rhythmic gymnast, figure skater, more gymnastics. We're thinking like Simone Biles of opera singers. These were parts that were originally written for altos who had an extended range, what we would call secure high notes, meaning they can reliably and easily hit them, and it sounds like it's part of their voice. Now sometimes, depending on how much of a death wish she has, sopranos will play these roles instead of mezzos, and let me just apologize on behalf of sopranos everywhere. I'm so sorry, mezzos. And the roles I'm talking about here are usually from the Rossini, Bellini, Handel sort of time period. So that's your Julius Caesar in Giulio Cesare, Romeo in the Capulets and the Montagues, Ruggiero in Alcina, but obviously the most famous is Rosina in The Barber of Seville. And this is an excerpt of Joyce DiDonato singing Una voce poco fa.
Ma se mi trovano dove io devo sono non libera sarò e 100 drammi prima di cedere oro giocare.
All right, and next we have our lyric mezzos. Same range as the coloratura as all mezzo roles will be, so that's G3 to B5 again. But this is a much more velvety voice. I like to think of contemporary dancers here. It's warmer and darker. It's really sensitive. It sounds very human. I know that sounds stupid because it's a human voice, but I think because they spend more time in areas like the speaking voice, so in their chest and their middle registers, it sounds a lot more familiar to us. So these would be roles like Cherubino in The Marriage of Figaro, Suzuki in Madame Butterfly, Dorabella in Così fan tutte. But of course, we're gonna look at the most famous mezzo role, bar absolutely none, Carmen. And last we have our dramatic mezzo. Again, same range, G3 to B5, and these women have big voices. Similar to dramatic sopranos, it carries really easily over these big orchestras. They even actually have a similar range, but again, it's just that mezzos sing in that lower tessitura. They're, again, CrossFit icons. They have really high endurance and lots of power. This is your composer in Ariadne auf Naxos, Gertrude in Hansel and Gretel, Delilah in Samson and Delilah. And for this one, we're going to look at the flip side of Sophie's coin in Der Rosenkavalier with Octavian's Wie du warst. And finally, we have our contraltos. This is the basement of the female voices, and their range is from an F3 to an A5. She's like the third member of the CrossFit gym, so lots of size, lots of power, lots of stamina. And I know we've said it a couple of times, but this voice type is actually super, super rare. Now, it's not to say that the range itself is rare, because there are plenty of women in the world who can sing lower than an F3 perfectly comfortably. But it's the idea of being able to sing that low really loudly to the point where you can carry over a full orchestra without a microphone. And because it's such a rare voice type, there aren't that many true contralto roles. But there are a couple. So that would be Gaea from Daphne, Geneviève from Péléas et Mélisande. But today, we're going to check out the Principessa from Puccini's Suor Angelica.
Nel silenzio di quella cuore mente, il mio spirito merito perché sei lontane.
And oh my gosh, guys, we did it. We've reached the end. These are all the female voice types in opera. If you happen to still have any stamina left after that, you can click here to check out the nearly 20 different male voice types if you thought this was a lot. And you guys know the drill. Thanks again for nerding out with me, and I'll see you next time on Scores Unstitched.